So how do you go from this to this? So let's talk about lighting and how you can maximize your lighting game. Let's roll. So lighting is essentially a subjective art. Every filmmaker and every videographer has their own unique style and how they set up their keys and fills and backlights, as well as diffusion or not using diffusion. This is what sets their video and their filmmaking apart from other videographers. Now, there's no right way of setting up your lights, and everyone's lighting tastes are different. You can go for a darker or more somber style of lighting, which has more shadows and more darker, rich hues. Or you could also go for a more saturated look, a more bright and colorful style to your filmmaking. Each lighting setup serves a purpose. It serves a purpose for the image that you're looking to create, as well as the emotion you're looking to invoke within the viewer. Regardless of the style of lighting that you use, there is essentially a fundamental way of setting about your lights in every shoot. Now that's using a key light in the front, using potentially a fill light or multiple film lights behind or to the side of your subject, and backlighting your subject. This essentially can be used with softboxes and even RGB lights and panels, or also colorful RGB lights at the back that I'm using as well. Every tool can serve a purpose when it comes to setting up that proper lighting setup. So for a little bit of filming 101, there are 3 main lights, and those lights are your key light, your fill light, and your backlight. Now the key light provides the most of the illumination on your subject. It's placed directly in front of the person you're interviewing and will be the brightest, most powerful light source you have. The fill light usually casts light in the darker areas by your subject and works to augment what the key light does. Your fill light should be softer and more diffused than your key light, and it's also possible to have more than one source as that fill. And the backlight, just as you may have thought, is what you put behind your subjects. It's usually referring to the hairline or rim light or the edge light, and the backlight will also help capture that feel as well as idea of more dimensional look within your filmmaking. So first up, let's talk about my key light. Now the key light is my softbox that's right here that you can't see, but I'm gonna walk around and show you some B-roll. What I use is the Amaran 200X bicolor LED light. Now this is a Bowens mount LED that has fantastic brightness, it has color temperature control, and gives a beam angle of 105 degrees. It also is Bluetooth app controllable because you can use the Sidus Link app from Aperture. If you haven't used Aperture products, which I'll talk about on the next one behind me, get an Aperture light. They will change your filmmaking life for the better. This light is fantastic, and by throwing a softbox modifier onto this creates this nice, soft, warm light that's coming down as my main key. Now I have this as a relatively warm and bright shot. I didn't make it too moody for this one. And why I say this is because you want to make sure that you have enough light when it comes to certain videos you're doing, and you don't want to be sitting in the shadows, or even if you don't have a high ISO output on your camera, or if you're looking at a lens that doesn't maybe have a low f-stop, you have to have enough light to properly light your subject. So you're not going to be running into a lot of noise in post. This light is affordable. It's about $400, and if you get a nice stand, as well as don't forget your sandbag and a modifier, you can get a whole package in for roughly about, I'd say, $700 in as your main light. And this light goes everywhere in the studio with me. It's on every video. It even comes to every single shoot that I do as one of my main keys. I love this Amaran light, and I highly recommend it as an affordable option for your main key. So the next light is my fill light, and that's the light that's off over here, casting a little bit of warm colors on my shoulder as well as a bit of a rim light on my shoulder. I kind of cheated in this case, and I've made my fill my rim light, but it gets the job done. And in this case, I have 2 of these, and these are the Luxceo tube lights. And I love these lights. These are RGB lights, and they're also controlled by the Luxceo app. Similar to the Sidus Link app, it gives the ability of being able to program these things. And these lights are amazing. And I've used these lights essentially on short films where this was the only light used on the project. We shot recently a mock horror sci-fi suspense short called Shelter, which is coming out this spring. And this light was the only light that we used when we were filming in this post-apocalyptic environment. These lights are durable, they're waterproof, you can change the colors on them with the RGB clicker, and they have a battery that lasts 12 hours. Now, suffice it to say, I've had this now and it hasn't died, and I haven't charged it once. It charges by USB. They say 12 hours, but this is now going on about 14. So Props to the good folks at Luxceo because this is an amazing product, but by putting it on a stand next to me, this gives me an amazing fill light or a rim light because it provides that glow on my shoulder as well as the side of my face and my cheek there. It offsets the key by providing a bit of a kick light on my shoulder area, and it's also fundamental to basically grow out the three-dimensional style of your lighting process. So another favorite in my kit is the Amaran RGB Light. This little bad boy has multiple color selections that you can change by adjusting hue and saturation. You can go all the way across the color spectrum, and I use these as backlights. I put them behind me all the time to essentially create more mood behind me, as we have with the blue hue back there, or by putting it in my traditional favorite of orange and blue. I'm gonna look at my side screen here to see how this looks. But this setup works quite well, actually, even better than the first one, because I'm wearing a blue hat, I've got a blue background, and I've got an extra blue light. By putting it behind me, it kicks up light. It basically augments the background by giving an extra dimension to the light behind your subject. I always recommend doing this, and you don't have to just use these RGB lights. You could also use potentially another fill light or another softbox, a Godox or an Amaran or an aperture light, and point it behind you to the wall or whatever is behind your subject. This kicks up more light and essentially outlines the back of your subject, gives more three-dimension to what you're looking to create. Now, we often use these for subject B-roll if we're doing any kind of material for interviews. If you have a color backdrop or a white backdrop, it brings out more color and more definition, and I highly recommend getting a good backlight for your next shoot. You can mount these little lights, you can put them on stands. They're also controlled, as I said earlier, by that Sidus Link app, and they're just smart investments when it comes to growing the lighting kit for your film kit. So behind me, we now have a Pratical Light. It is essentially a practical / rim / fill, but for the sake of where it's being positioned, let's call it a practical light. Now, most practical lights are light bulbs, or they're lights from lamps, or lights that may be hanging down from something, or lights on a string, or Christmas lights, or all that kind of stuff. Lights that are not set up particularly to light said subject or be a key element of the key or fill or backlight or rim light, etc., are often referred to as practical lights. They're practical to the scene or practical to the style of shooting. Now, what we have behind me is my Luxceo tube on my stand, and that acts with that Cinebloom filter and creating that practical effect. It is also kicking up some light on my shoulder and acting as a semi-fill. Now, most fill lights are not seen in the background of your subject or to the left or to the right. They're usually off camera to kind of augment and create the proper established setup. But in this case, it kind of works. It's kicking up some light on my shoulder, and it's giving an extra level of dimension to the shot. And you would be amazed, the first step you have to do when it comes to lighting setup is just turning off the lights in the space that you're in. Turn off those practical bulbs above you in the studio or in the space or in your room, and then utilize your key and your fill and your backlights. These are the lights that you're using for your film space, not the lights that you have already in the location unless you want to use them. But if you can turn off the lights and use natural light or of course your lighting setup, this will guarantee the best results. And of course, with lighting, the more you move lights around, the more you actually like the setup. And we've now changed that orange hue light of the RGB back to more of a blue, and I've kind of moved my fill light off to my side here. And I actually like this lighting setup better than I had at the beginning. So lighting is fluid. It's something that grows with what you're doing in your shoot, and it takes time to set up. Dedicate the proper setup time to any lighting arrangement you're doing for filmmaking. Don't rush the lighting process, because when you go in post and you take a look at what you got, lighting can make or break anything. And lighting is what's key to establishing your filmmaking process, and it's key to making your video a success. You could shoot on a $50,000 camera, or you could shoot on a $500 camera, but if your lights are poor on either shot, it's going to show. So always make sure that you have that lighting setup planned out and ready to go so you get the maximum amount of essentially goodness when you have your film project on the go. Now, I promised myself in 2023 that I'd be doing one long format and one YouTube short per week, and I've already fallen off the bandwagon at the beginning of February. However, I'm going to try and see if I can get back on track and deliver you guys all sorts of great content on setup for filmmaking and editing tricks and gear reviews on how you can maximize what you can put into your kit to get the best result. If you found this video helpful, hit that like and subscribe button below, and I will catch you in the next video. Peace.